It has been 12 long years since Project Aces brought us the last numbered entry in the Ace Combat series. Since then, we've gotten a real-world spin-off and a free-to-play spin-off, but there hasn't been a true successor to the arcade-style flight simulator series since 2007. Until now. Ace Combat 7 is here, and it brings the world of Strange Reel to the PC for the first time ever. But a lot has changed since Fires of Liberation, so here's what you can expect from the newest entry in the series. And if you're new to the series altogether, well, here's what you've been missing. Now, if you're coming into this from Ace Combat Assault Horizon, there's a big change for you. This game contains 100% less helicopter piloting, and thus 100% less helicopter barrel rolls. Trust me, this is for the best. Ace Combat is a series about flying military jets, with impossibly large payloads to complete weird pseudo-sci-fi objectives on an alternate reality Earth. And in that sense, Ace Combat 7 Skies Unknown delivers beautifully. From flying aircraft carriers to AI-controlled drones to a literal space elevator, there is no shortage of interesting missions based around silly future tech. Now, if you're a series veteran, things should feel pretty familiar. Nostalgic, even. The planes handle pretty much the same as they ever have, and that's a good thing. Realistically, very little has changed with the game's basic mechanics, because very little has needed to change. However, there is one very major new mechanic, and that's weather. Weather brings in a number of new things to worry about.
Use the clouds to hide from their satellites, and you just might have a chance to shake off their missiles.
Clouds will make it harder to see, both for you personally and for your targeting system to lock onto targets. Flying through clouds at high altitude can cause your wings to ice up, temporarily reducing your ability to turn. High winds can push your plane in all directions, forcing you to fight really hard against it just to keep moving on a straight vector. And you can even have your sensors scrambled by a lightning strike. Now, there are also some new sub-weapons, including literal laser beams, but mostly it just kind of feels like more of the same, even right down to the game giving you the choice between normal and expert control schemes. Now, on that note, a quick word of advice to those of you who are new to the Ace Combat series. Expert is the objectively correct control scheme. Yes, it might take a mission or two for you to get used to, but you'll be glad you did. The normal control scheme locks you out of the majority of fun maneuvers you can pull off in the game. Sure, the normal scheme will keep you level with the ground, but the expert scheme lets you pull off the stuff that gets you kicked out of the Air Force Academy. As for the story, I won't say too much for spoilers' sake, but for those who don't know, the Ace Combat games have a surprisingly rich world with lots of lore and history. The unnecessarily compelling stories often show a full-scale war from the perspectives of both pilots and ordinary people on the ground. Ace Combat 7 definitely follows that same formula for its story, but it's clearly also taking extra care to pay homage to some of the more memorable moments in the series' history. Now, that doesn't mean that you need to have played all the games to catch up on the story, just that longtime fans will get a little something extra out of it. Now, I've mostly talked about what's the same so far, but there is one thing that is relatively new: the upgrade tree. Ace Combat 7 carries over the upgrade tree from the free-to-play spin-off Ace Combat Infinity, and as a result, there's a degree of customization there that hasn't really existed in previous games. And before you think it, don't worry. The upgrades are all purchased with currency earned in-game, so it is definitely not a microtransaction trap. Planes and plane upgrades all occupy nodes on the upgrade tree, and as you might expect, unlocking one opens up the ones that follow. After the first couple of planes, you pretty much have to start unlocking upgrade parts to get to later game aircraft. These upgrade parts can be applied to any plane, and they do things like increase your plane's speed and maneuverability, upgrade the power or homing ability of your missiles and sub-weapons, or even prevent your wings from icing over. Each plane has a set of 3 sub-weapons, 2 of which also need to be unlocked. Most planes will end up giving you a combination of air-to-air and air-to-ground weapons to choose from, so you can spec your loadout appropriately for each mission. The difference that customization makes in gameplay is relatively minor in campaign mode. You might go for a little more agility parts in precision flying missions, or a little more firepower in combat-heavy ones, but in multiplayer, you'll notice that difference a lot more. So let's talk a little bit about multiplayer. There's a lot about Ace Combat 7 that's really good, because it hasn't really been changed too much in the last 12 years or so. Multiplayer is unfortunately not one of those things. It definitely feels dated. Of course, the actual multiplayer games themselves feel fine. It's responsive and it's not really laggy, but there are only two modes: Battle Royale and Team Deathmatch. And Battle Royale isn't what you think it is. It's just standard deathmatch without teams. So that's the bad part. The good part is that the multiplayer flying is fun, and the upgrade tree has a whole unique branch of upgrades specifically for that mode. So if you're looking to really play around with the customization in the game, this is where you do it. Many of the upgrades in the multiplayer-only tree are much stronger than the campaign-based ones, and you can go up with them multiple levels. Also, the currency you gain from multiplayer and the currency you gain from single player are the same. Since it all goes into the same pool, you could theoretically unlock every upgrade in the tree from only playing single player or only playing multiplayer. If you wanted to head into the campaign with the best planes and a fully stocked upgrade tree, you totally can. So, long story short, there isn't too much variety in the multiplayer. You'll get dogfighting in the skies, and that's about all. But what is there is polished and pretty fun, and the customization gives it a little extra strategy. So that leaves us one major thing to discuss: the VR mode. And for the subset of people watching this that actually own a VR headset, it's worth noting that Ace Combat 7 does have a VR campaign. The good news here is that this is a near perfect usage of VR, being a rare situation in which it makes perfect sense while you're sitting down while you play with a headset on. The bad news is that it isn't the whole campaign or even multiplayer you play in VR. It's a special VR campaign with only 3 missions. That's the only thing you can play in VR, and those 3 missions are pretty short. In total, you're probably looking at less than an hour of content there. It's really good content, there's just not very much of it. VR owners, it's up to you on whether that's worth it. Now that about covers the need-to-know stuff for Ace Combat 7. Series veterans will be right at home with it, and new players have a perfectly good place to jump in. The game definitely has limitations in the multiplayer and VR modes, but those modes are still solid. It's just a question of how important replay value is to you. If you have any other questions, leave them in the comments below. I'll answer as many as I can personally. I've been Dean from Curse, and maybe I'll see you in the skies.